to be with you. Robert Norquist, I run Americans for Tax Reform. We obviously work on trying to keep taxes down, a little less painful, both at the federal and the state level. A lot of interesting things happening at the state level, which will be discussed in a little bit. Next year, this meeting is going to be interesting because while Mr. Trump has made it clear, President Trump has made it clear he will not raise taxes. He wants to make permanent the tax cuts that were there before and go beyond that. The President of the United States put out this book, which is his list of tax increases. And as you go through it, it's $5 trillion in tax increases. It taxes small businesses, personal income taxes, corporate income taxes. It gives us a new death tax on top of the one we had before to make sure you catch all of the inflation he's created. And it takes the capital gains tax, and I'll just read footnote number 19 on page 80. Together, this capital gains tax, the proposals would increase the top marginal rate on long-term capital gains and qualified dividends to 44.6%. 44.6%. That is the highest level in the last 100 years. We've never had a capital gains tax that high. It's gone like this, and then you come over here, and it pop up here, higher than Jimmy Carter. That is the plan they have. Oh, I'm sorry, I left out $47 billion of taxes on energy. With that, we have some wonderful leaders in Congress who have been trying to work the other side of that issue. And if I could ask Congressman Russell Fry of South Carolina, longtime friend of the taxpayers as a state legislator there, and now working in the House Judiciary Committee, doing oversight, which our friends at the IRS really need. Sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you for Americans for Tax Reform for having this. Grover Norquist, longtime friend. Really appreciate your work in the state legislature as well. To start with, I want to paint a quick picture. Imagine this. You're an independent journalist. You're asked to testify in front of Congress. You do your duty, and you do so. In your testimony, you reveal some pretty unsettling things about the government. You explain that through your work, you've seen evidence that the federal government has been colluding with big tech. And along with other things, the government told social media companies to whitelist, blacklist, censor accounts that didn't align with the administration's own narrative. And what happens when you get home? Well, you discover that the IRS has paid a visit to your house. This isn't fiction. This is the reality from award-winning journalist Matt Taibbi. And the very same day that he testified in front of Congress, the IRS paid a visit to his home. And when he told our committee this information, it startled us, as it should startle every single American. So we took a look and we investigated. Look, Americans deserve a government works for them, not one that comes after them. The Biden administration's federal government reigned free for nearly 2 years without any oversight, expanding its overreach and providing opportunities for the government to be weaponized against American citizens. When we took the majority, both the House Judiciary Committee and the Oversight Committee uncovered a rife of unsettling instances of Americans being targeted by all manner of agencies. And of course, the IRS is no exception to that. And of course, the IRS has a very long and troubled history of going after American citizens. We remember the Tea Party wave and the targeting of Tea Party groups under Lois Lerner. When two brave whistleblowers came forward about the inconsistencies and attempted cover-up for Hunter Biden, they faced retaliation from within the IRS. And they're not just targeting people that are exposing government misconduct. They're unjustly targeting everyday American citizens, too. In Chairman Jim Jordan's own district in Ohio, an IRS agent gave a taxpayer a fake name to gain entry into their home and threatened to put a lien on their house and freeze her assets if she did not give the IRS a substantial amount of money. You can't make this up, and it's an unfortunate reality in our country today. Government agencies are supposed to serve we the people, not we the government. The bureaucracy, unfortunately, is being weaponized against us. One of the great things, though, is I think we've been able to shed light on this conduct and these behaviors, particularly from a civil liberty standpoint. And since we've uncovered these unsettling actions by the IRS, the agency has terminated its decades-long practice of unannounced visits to taxpayers' homes. We no longer have to fear the IRS agents' unannounced visits in an attempt to harass, intimidate, or coerce, or otherwise target American citizens. I think this is a huge win for our taxpayers and for our country. We will continue in our job in the Judiciary Committee and the Oversight Committee to put an end to the IRS and other agencies in their targeting of American citizens. And thank you for your tireless efforts, ATR, on behalf of the taxpayers and everything that you do. Thank you. And you want questions?
If there are any specific questions here, yes. If not, I think you made a sale.
All right.
I spoke with Mr. Taibbi after that happened to him, and he said they did everything other than leave a horse's head at the bed. So he felt sufficiently annoyed. We have with us Congresswoman Beth Van Dyne of Texas, Ways and Means Committee, and founder of the House Mayor's Caucus. On deck, Kevin Hern, Oklahoma.
I appreciate being invited, and again, I guess you're the common denominator. Everybody has known Grover Norquist's work for a number of years, and some of us are proud to be able to call him a friend. You know, America's working families and small businesses are being punched in the gut week in and week out. And without needing any official government statement, yesterday's inflation report was something families across our country could have told you was real and painful and badly impacting their lives. No matter what messaging is coming out of the White House, it's almost always the exact opposite of what's happening or is about to happen. We were told inflation would be what? Transient, right? We were told that inflation was just a rich person's problem. We were told that the Inflation Reduction Act would reduce inflation. And now we're being told by the White House that the economy is great. Everyone should just shut up and be happy with a big government spending, with a massive debt, with inflation that's wrecking lives and businesses, and just embrace the ever tighter grip of federal government control over our future. Yesterday, I watched a focus group segment with swing voters that I couldn't believe they actually aired on MSNBC. Every single one of the participants said that their lives would be better under a Trump-run economy. All of them agreed that they were sick of Joe Biden gaslighting them and having no clue about the pain that they are experiencing because of inflation and high mortgage rates, and also how they see their future slipping away. We have an opportunity in front of us to deliver tremendous progress for all of these people and to earn support for decades to come. What we have to offer them isn't based on speculation. It's not based on our guess about pro-growth supply-side policies and what they can do to expand our economy and opportunity, to raise their wages, the reduced inflation, but it's to put us back on a path where families aren't just surviving, but where they're thriving. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act did all of that and more by bringing massive investment from overseas and making America more globally competitive than we had been in a long time. The vision of then Chairman Kevin Brady, the Republican conference, and of course President Trump was to unleash Americans to do what we do best, and that is to succeed. And we will succeed when the government is out of our way. Joe Biden and congressional Democrats offer a continued path of control, oppression, and the light dimming of our future. Our mission must be to speak courageously and boldly about how our policies make American lives more full, vibrant, and open the kind of opportunities that create paths to stability and prosperity. They create generational wealth and accumulation that truly helps expand the growth of our all-important American middle class. So while this press conference may be focused on tax policy and the heavy hand of the IRS, it's truly about so much more, and the American people know it. They're hungry for leaders with solutions. They want us to succeed for them and their families. And now it's up to us to deliver, because a stronger, brighter, and a greater American future depends on it. So thank you very much for allowing me to participate.
Thank you. Absolutely. We're now joined by House Majority Leader Steve Scalise from Louisiana, who's been a leader for taxpayers going back to his days in Louisiana legislature, where he led the Taxpayer Protection Caucus in that great state.
Well, Grover, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, as always, I want to thank Americans for Tax Reform, and especially Grover Norquist for his leadership and always standing up for the hardworking families of America to make sure that Washington keeps their hands out of their pockets. If you look at the President Biden's agenda over the last few years, look, Joe Biden started off when he came into office with the goal and then carried it out to double the size of the IRS. Think about that, double the size of the IRS. We get a lot of calls as members of Congress from constituents for a lot of things. We need help, people, veterans that want federal agencies to help them, or maybe the benefits that they earn and they're not properly getting. I have never gotten a single call from a constituent asking them to add a single person to the ranks of the IRS, let alone to double the size of the IRS. But that was Joe Biden's agenda, and he passed it. Now, we've been fighting in a Republican majority to bring that back down, to take that. If you look at the Israel funding bill we sent over to the Senate, paid for it by taking some of the money out of the new IRS agents. So again, hardworking families would be able to see that we can help our friend Israel and not have to borrow that money. So it was another example of a contrast between what we're trying to do in this House Republican majority and what Joe Biden wants to do. But one final piece, and this is something we work with Grover on so many things, the anti-carbon tax resolution that we brought again. We actually grew the vote on that bill this year. So Ryan Zinke led the effort this year, and you saw a bigger vote of not only Republicans but Democrats. We actually had 10 Democrats that joined with us to say we shouldn't have a carbon tax. At the time, Joe Biden's trying to crush the fossil fuel industry in America, where we recognize that making energy in America is the smartest, most efficient, and lowest emitting way to make energy in the entire world. We should be making more in America. Joe Biden wants to crush the industry, wants to tax the industry, which means hardworking families would pay more money for their energy costs. Families don't want to do that. They shouldn't have to do it. And every Republican said, no, they shouldn't have to, and we even had some Democrats that joined us. But if you wonder what the difference is with this one vote majority, why it's so important to keep this Republican majority, with one vote in the majority, as thin as that is, as tough as it is sometimes to pass the things we want, the one thing that's not happening is Joe Biden's not getting his agenda passed through Congress. You watch the State of the Union. What did Joe Biden talk about? When you shave off all the angry, divisive rhetoric, which was most of what he said, he talked about raising more taxes on hardworking families. Families are sick of the increased spending and increased taxes that are crushing their chance to get the American dream. And so House Republicans, with that one vote majority, are the only thing standing in the way of those higher taxes, that higher inflation that Joe Biden wants to impose upon those families. And ATR has always been at the forefront of that fight. So always great to work with you, Grover. Thanks for your leadership and what you do to stand up for those hardworking families that are counting on you.
Thank you. Absolutely. No arguments.
Okay, go get it.
I'll tell you one quick secret. They don't want the carbon tax. They want the VAT. The carbon tax is a value-added tax on training wheels. And at the end of the day, the Democrats love a VAT carbon tax. It will turn into a value-added tax, and then we're Europe, and no one will shave anymore. Okay, we have with us Congressman Kevin Hern, Republican of Oklahoma, who also runs the Republican Study Committee and fights taxes from that perch as well.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do. It's a relentless battle and perseverance to try to keep tax dollars out of Washington, D.C. And once again, tax day is coming, and our annual reminder that the federal government doesn't have any money. It only has our money as taxpayer, and I think people in D.C. forget that time and time again. And as we look at this, we need to be good fiduciaries of the hardworking taxpayer and the dollars that come here, and making sure that we're doing the right thing with those that are here, and making sure that we continue to push back on budgets like you saw from Joe Biden that raised taxes by some almost $6 trillion. And you contrast that with the Republican Study Committee budget, which cut taxes by $5.5 trillion over the next decade. So very important. I think it's our duty in Congress to continue to be good stewards of the American taxpayer dollars. And, I think so many people here think that Congress has all this money in the federal government, and again, I remind people time and time again, they simply do not have any money. I think also when you look at what's going on here, and we're at $35 trillion in debt, $34.6 trillion as of this morning and growing. Too many people up here believe that deficits don't matter, overspending doesn't matter, the bloating of government doesn't matter. And I think it's important as a Republican conference that we got to continue to bring hope to the American people. That's why it's so important that we take the Senate, keep the House, and get the White House so that we can restore the faith of the American people in what we do in the United States government. Because there's a lot of lost hope among the American people, and right now what you're seeing with this crazy overspending and the debt that's been added under Joe Biden. So as we go forward here, we're going to be looking at this and making sure that we're continuing to work on this. I know that Jody's pushing forward a budget that balances in 10 years when Joe Biden's budget doesn't even balance at all. That's such a disservice to the American people. You know, when you look at what was said just a minute ago from Congresswoman Van Dyne, almost 20% inflation, and the president wonders why people are discouraged by his economic policies, the Bidenomics. It's because they're paying 20% more today than they were when he became in office. So it's really problematic of what's going on. So we've got to continue to help with tax relief, as I said, and we can do that if we get rid of wasteful spending, duplicative spending, which is also wasteful spending. We've got to do tax policy today, right now as we speak. Congresswoman Van Dyne and I are in a Ways and Means hearing talking about what the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act did for the American people, something that the leader worked on a lot, along with Chairman Brady, to get that done under a President Trump and a U.S. Senate that worked together to make this happen. Not a single Democrat supported that narrative of removing tax dollars from Washington, D.C. Every metric across the board says those who needed tax relief got tax relief, and the upper 1% paid more taxes. Paid more taxes. CBO, JCT, everybody says that. So in spite of what all of the Democrats are saying about how it was so harmful, it was ridiculous. We took corporate tax rates from 35% to 21%, put us in the median across the world in tax policy, stopped the inversions where companies were leaving America and taking jobs with them. American companies are coming back. And so that's really important. We also have Senator Phil Gramm, former Senator Phil Gramm, over there doing testimony as a witness. Somebody that's ostensibly been known for all the stuff he's done in tax policy on the Senate side. We have Dr. Paul Winfrey over there talking about his work with the President Trump, and this, getting this 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act pushed through. August Pfluger and I are continuing to look at ways that we can remove the tax policy that has been terrible toward investing in America. And so what we've done is we've introduced a piece of legislation called the Renewing Investment in American Workers and Supply Chains Act, which will help businesses to reinvest more of their own capital and higher wages and new jobs. And Grover, you've been a big supporter of that, and we really appreciate all your work that you continue to do and your support. And thanks for giving us the opportunity just to talk about what we're doing today in Congress. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's a letter.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
And one of the great things about inflation is it helps the Democrats with their trickle-down taxation theory. This is, remember he promised, this is Biden, he's only going to tax people who make more than $400,000. Thanks to inflation, in 1921 dollars, you only had to make $335,000 to be hit by higher taxes. And another 3 or 4 years of Biden, and more people would become fair game. So they start by saying we're going to tax the rich. They haven't finished the sentence. We're going to tax the rich first, then everybody else. My favorite congressman in the whole world, Carol Miller, who is the leader on fighting against the 1099K ridiculous paperwork, and I hope you'll mention that with whatever else you'd like to share with us today. We need to win this one.
Thank you so much, and for all the hard work you do. Yes, I am Carol Miller, and I just left a Ways and Means meeting, and I'm a little bit in a mood because there were some Democrats there saying not kind things about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and all the wonderful things that have occurred because of that. The bill that I've had stick in my craw for a long time is about the 1099K. And, Congress is the one who makes the laws. We're the ones that do the rest. And in their infinite wisdom or lack thereof, they decided to change the threshold of the 1099K from $20,000 and 200 transactions to $600. Now, if you decide that you're downsizing your house and you want to sell that Peloton and those old skis and a lot of the stuff you're not using anymore, and you have a garage sale and you bring in more than $600, you are now a retailer, and you are going to be taxed on all of that money. On those things that you already bought and paid taxes on, you're going to pay taxes on the loss you just took by selling them again. If you are a college guy or girl and you have several buddies and you rent a house together, but one of you pays through Venmo or whatever, and so you give your money to that person, they are now in the real estate business because they will be taxed on all of those rent checks that you're giving them to pay to the landlord. This is a bad idea. And the IRS realized that it was a bad idea. So they actually put it on hold. That's not the IRS's job, by the way. They do not make the laws. They're supposed to implement the laws. But they knew that bill and that law stunk so much that they held off on it. Now, the IRS has decided that they will make it a $5,000 threshold. They don't make the laws. They're breaking the law by doing this. And so, once again, I have put in a bill to bring it back to the 20,000 and the 200 transactions. You know, government always has their hand in your pocket, but by golly, I think this was one step too far. Is that enough?
That's good.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whoops. That's yours.
Yep.
All right.
There are 57 or so states, and while there's a lot of focus on what's happening here in D.C. Oh, those are my cool notes. Yep. I wouldn't be able to talk for the rest of the week. While interesting things are happening in D.C. and very bad things are being threatened in D.C., there's a lot of exciting progress in the 50 states. And if I could ask Patrick Gleason to come up and give a sense of the movement there, because I think that helps and informs congressmen, senators, and people who work on Capitol Hill that there's this incredible undercurrent moving in very healthy ways across the country right now. Patrick.
Yeah, so I am here today to share the great news for taxpayers that's coming out of the state capitals all over the country. And as Grover mentioned, it stands in stark contrast to the tax policy changes being pursued by this White House. So what we're looking at is a historic level of tax cutting activity in the states in recent years. In particular, if you go back to 2020, over half the states have cut income taxes since 2020. Not only that, we've seen a historic jump in the number of flat income tax states. About a decade ago, when North Carolina enacted tax reform moving from a graduated to a flat income tax, they were the 8th state to have a flat income tax. And it had been some time since the state had enacted a flat income tax. It had been over a decade before North Carolina since a state had done that. It had been more than another decade before that since the state had done that. Well, since North Carolina broke that tax flattening drought about a decade ago, we've seen a huge spike in the number of flat income tax states around the country. In fact, we've seen a 75% increase in the number of flat income tax states since North Carolina enacted theirs about a decade ago and really kicked off this activity in earnest. And we've gone from 8 with North Carolina to 14 now. In fact, today there are 12 states with a flat income tax, but 2 more are going to have flat income taxes take effect in the coming years due to legislation that's already been codified. 2 of those 2 states that are about to have flat income taxes take effect in the coming years. I want to highlight one, Iowa, because that's the site of one of the most significant tax reform plans, not just in recent years, but in recent decades. And it's thanks to the leadership of Speaker Pat Grassley and Senate Leader Jack Whitfer, and certainly Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, that they've taken their state's tax code from a graduated tax system with a flat rate above, it was 8.53%, and they are bringing that down to what will next year be a flat 3.9% tax. So 8.53 graduated, top rate 8.5 to a flat 3.9 next year. Pretty significant, and they're not done there, in fact. Governor Kim Reynolds has made clear numerous times recently that she wants her state, Iowa, to join the club of no income tax states. And she's not the only one. In Arkansas, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders has stated that's her same goal as well. In fact, she made tremendous progress towards that goal last year alone. She was the only governor last year to enact 2 income tax cuts in the same year in 2023. So she's well on her way to achieving her goal. And the good news for taxpayers is that governors and lawmakers in other state capitals also share this goal. So when you look at the no income tax states where we are today, we're at 7. It's going to go to 8 at the end of this year when New Hampshire's investment income tax is fully phased out. That was part of a reform enacted by Governor Chris Sununu. That'll take us to 8 no income tax states. And so we'll see that. And then when you take the 8 no income tax states and combine those with the flat tax states, we are now at almost half of the country has a flat or zero rate income tax. And I'm confident that the next few years, certainly by the end of this decade, most of the states in this country will have either a flat or a zero rate income tax. And I'll close by pointing out just how some of the tax reforming efforts taking place here could impact state tax codes. In particular, I want to highlight the effort to restore full business expensing for capital expenditures and R&D, which, as many folks here know, the House passed earlier this year. Should that become law federally, it wouldn't just have positive effects on the federal tax code and the economy. We all know those. It would also have a positive impact on state tax codes. And that's because nearly half of the states would have automatic full business expensing restored that instant as soon as it's passed federally. That's because of the way states conform to the federal tax code. If federal full business expensing is enacted, it will automatically trigger it in nearly half of the states. We'll once again have full business expensing for state tax purposes. And I'll point out that lawmakers and governors in a lot of states aren't waiting for Congress to take this action. Governor Bill Lee in Tennessee and state legislators in Nashville were the first state to restore R&D expensing at the state level. Oklahoma, we heard from Congressman Hearn earlier, lawmakers in his state and Governor Stitt were the first state to reinstate full expensing for capital expenditures at the state level, and other states have since followed suit, Mississippi and Arkansas in particular. So hopefully Congress will fully follow suit and we'll get federal full expensing reinstated, which will automatically take care of that in many of the states. But in the meantime, I think we'll see more states not wait on Congress and take that action. So that's some of the good news coming from the states I want to highlight this year, and I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I quickly went through the number of Biden's tax increases, quickly through what they are. There's $5 trillion. When you go to the capital gains tax, they want to take it up to 44.6. That's written down. He did the calculations for us. But that's not the whole story, because as Patrick was saying, you also have state taxes and state capital gains taxes. And in California, when you take that national federal 44.6 and you add California's tax on capital gains, 59%. So you and your spouse have spent 30, 40 years building a small business. All the way through, you've paid property taxes and sales taxes and excise taxes and small business taxes and the FICA taxes for your workers. And now you're going to sell the small business and get a capital gain and then look to retire. And in California, the government will take 59% of your life work, and that includes inflation. They will be taxing the inflation that you suffered under as well. And that capital gains tax at 44.6 compares to the average in the developed world of under 19%. It makes us not competitive. The small business tax hike, of course, a lot of small businesses, partnerships pay taxes through the individual rate, and politicians like to forget that when they say we're going to raise taxes on the rich, the first group they hit, and probably one of the largest numbers they hit, are small businesses that pay at a 39.6% rate plus whatever states hit as well. The second death tax is by not having the step up in basis. One, when your parents die, the government has to come in and look at everything you own, because they have to now assess what it once was worth and tax you on it. So they have to know how much gold was in everybody's teeth if they're going to do it right. But what they also do is then capture and tax all the Biden inflation, and you get to pay a tax on that rather than do step up, which we've historically done. There's also, for in a nation where more than half the people have 401ks, IRAs, or in the stock market, President Biden and the Democrats put in a 1% buyback. So if Amazon says we have $1 billion, what do we do with it? And they say the best thing we could do with that $1 billion is to invest it in Amazon. And because we think we've got some really great stuff we're doing, they would tax that. If they put it in a bank, it's not taxed. If they buy another company, it's not taxed. If they invest anywhere else in the world, it's not taxed. But if they invest it in themselves because they think they've got the best thing going, and I want to invest in companies that think they're the best thing going, there's a 1% tax, And the Democrats have now decided, or rather Biden has decided he wants to take that to 4. So when they say, oh, we're going to put in this little tax, we're going to feed you this little tapeworm, don't worry, it's a very small tapeworm. Tapeworms and small taxes tend to grow at their own pace. Biden's also pushing here that cartel idea. The Europeans were hoping we'd have a limit on taxation at 15, so you wouldn't have the corporate rate go below 15, so that we wouldn't outcompete Europe on taxes. If we're going to compete with Europe, evidently we're going to compete on lower wages, not lower taxes. I'm not sure Biden's thought that through. It certainly is not what workers would benefit from. But that tax, that cartel, that OPEC for tax collectors, now Biden has said 15 is too low. We want to take it to 25. 21. We want to raise taxes so we can never compete with the rest of the world on lower taxes. We must compete with China on lower wages. And of course, the carbon tax, which is not in the book. Other energy taxes are, but they talk about the carbon tax all day. So I think it's probably reasonable to say that it's such a large, icky tax, and as Congress just all voted repeatedly that they're not going to do it, they talk about it, they haven't written it down. I think it's probably on the to-do list. So with that, unless somebody has questions, we can close out for the day. Yes?
Thanks for doing this on Washington Post.
Good.
How do you think about, like you mentioned, that international tax framework?
The idea that we put a floor under?
Yeah. Along with President Trump's proposal on trade, specifically tariffs, some people would look at it and say, these are both different ways to cost access to American markets. And I wonder how you think about how each of those would affect consumers and individuals.
Starting with putting if you put a floor under either the personal income tax or the corporate income tax, they seem to be talking about corporate first, but you can imagine them getting to the point where they want to do it with individual taxes. I can't imagine the Europeans are going to allow people to move from France to low-tax European Union states forever, okay, without harmonizing their tax system and not allowing that level of taxation. Those high-tax states in the United States are really suffering. I mean, New York has tax. There are now fewer people in New York than in Florida. 2.5 million fewer in New York. That's not the way it was when I was a kid. But people are leaving New York and they move into Florida. They spend, 2 years ago, numbers, 230 billion state spending in New York, 115, exactly half in Florida. So they spend less. Some people go, how do they not have an income tax? Where do they get the money? The answer is they're spending 115 billion less. That's the income tax they don't have. It's not like they're getting the money from somewhere else. And Florida has roads and education and everything that New York has. They just don't have as many bureaucrats, and they don't pay them as well, and they don't have pensions the way they do in New York, and you're basically paying for bigger government. But the competition there keeps New York. Before I moved to the United States, I used to live in Massachusetts. And way back in the 80s, Massachusetts did Prop 2.5 because people were leaving in 1980. And they actually put some limits on property taxes and on arbitration and how much spending could go up. And it really stabilized Massachusetts for a long time. So they were being competitive with other states and made some very good decisions. If you don't have tax competition, you can avoid it two ways. You can have everybody passes a law that we're all going to not have tax competition. Or you can do what Argentina did and have tariffs to pretend there's no rest of the world. That also makes you not competitive, but you don't know it. You don't see it. So I would hope that Trump's discussion of tariffs is what he tried to do in the past, which was threaten them in order to get other things that he wanted. That is sort of understandable. At the end of the day, it's tough. Tariffs can make it tough. If you have tariffs on steel, how do you make your cars competitive? It's very difficult to make it work out the way you think it might. If only one thing was moving, you could sort of fix it, but many things are moving. So it's a tough way to organize. I think the thing we can do is try and work to have our arguments in some other zone than tariffs, but then make sure we do have competition Argentina is now coming back into the competitive world and wants their currency to have to be competitive, not pretend currency, and shift some of the tax burdens and so on. And that's going to be very interesting to watch because they cocooned themselves for a long time. And now they take all that down. How quickly can you react there? Good. And it's a very good question. I really think we should compete on lower taxes, less cost regulation, and better rule of law than other countries. It's safer to invest here because we have more rule of law. We're less likely to steal your stuff. I talked to a former guy who used to work for us at ATR, who does international stuff, and Ethiopia stole their factory. You know, they built this big factory. You think they just stole it? No. How did? No, they just took it. Well, that slows down the next guy's interest in investing. And so rule of law is so critical to that. But I think also you don't want to compete on lower wages. You want to compete on less expensive energy, less expensive government, better rules. Yeah.
Hi, Joseph Pius, right for Semaphore. Thanks for doing this. I want to get your perspective on the House tax bill that's currently languishing in the Senate. What's your read of what's going on there? And then also, are Senate Republicans, Crapo, are they making a mistake if they block the bill from proceeding and passing?
Yeah, this is, I wake up some mornings and I go, oh, it's going to pass, it's good. Then you talk to three people and go, oh, no, it's never going to pass. And then later that day, oh, no, it's going to go. I would not be surprised for it to end up in either way in the next, days, weeks. Americans for Tax Reform, me personally, and we had a joint letter of a lot of different tax-sensitive groups. How many signed on? 30? Does everyone have a copy of that letter? Okay. Yeah, good. I think that made the case for, and I've talked to Crapo, and I thought from my conversation with him that we'd get it done. That he was looking to get to yes, and he was trying to work with the Democrat leader over there one. And so I'm sometimes surprised back and forth in different ways. He had a list of things. I wish we had these things too, and several of them that you know about with the per child tax credit thinking and so on. I share his view. I'd rather have that in the bill than not have it in the bill. But I'd rather have the bill as is or modestly reformed than not have it. I think there's much to be said. And it's just innovative thinking. I think it's the generic understanding that most supporters of the bill have. If you can bring the tax bill together, so all up to today's, so that when we decide in 25 or whatever, do we have the votes or the commitment to make the whole thing go out 2 years, 10 years, permanent, however much you could do. You're not reaching back. You've got a straight line that you're moving forward as opposed to picking up a whole bunch of stuff and trying to line them back up again. I just think it's more difficult to make it either permanent or extended 2 or 10 years. And I think it'd be very healthy. I've shared with the Trump people that I think this is the world saying, here's several pieces of the Trump Republican tax cut, and we say they're so important that on a bipartisan basis we should keep them going. Take that as a compliment. Take that as, you were right. Not on the whole bill, maybe, but they used to say the whole thing was flawed. And now they're going, no, it's not all flawed. We love this bit. And that bit is not unimportant and was a good idea and is a good idea. I like the whole thing pretty much. But, so there's so many good arguments for getting it there. And the Republicans that are working on this, okay, sorry. The Republicans that are working on this, their concerns, and I think I agree with everyone that I've heard. Yes, I'd rather have that than not have it, both on the House side and on the Senate side. But with a Democratic president, a Democratic Senate, and a very close House, I think it's a fine step forward. And I would encourage, and we have been encouraging politely, with complete understanding. Great, you're right. Other things would be important to add to it. That would be good. I'm for that. So I'm hopeful they can get some improvements. I keep hearing sometimes, yes, maybe it's getting there, and then I don't hear back again. And I'm not the first guy that called, but I get these pieces of information from people I talk to them. sometimes it looks very optimistic and sometimes it just doesn't. And I would hate to put more than a nickel down on either direction if I was trying to bet something. If somebody's smarter, please talk to me afterwards, because I don't understand why it hasn't been able to come together, but there have to be pieces of it that I'm not seeing. So, nobody wants to argue about the carbon tax being the training wheels for that. I think that's quotable. But it is so true. That is exactly what is happening here. The other team that wants to turn us into Sweden, or actually Sweden's wrong. Sweden's got great tax policy compared to ours. I don't know why everybody thinks Sweden's a bunch of Bolsheviks. I think there was this period in the 70s when they sort of went, woo, and then they straightened up again. And, you know, they're quite good on a lot of tax policies and spending policies and school choice. And then the bikini team, I'm told. But they don't turn us into France, is what they want to do. And you have to have that. And so all this talk about rent tax rich people is to make you look over here while they put the that in your back pocket. And the that is how you get the money out of the middle class. They don't see it. The president can say, oh, all those greedy businessmen that just raise taxes, raise prices 20% because we put 20% of that in, how awful they are. Look, we're taxing billionaires over here. That's the big change. If we got that, we would be Europe. If we get a carbon tax, the companies that do make energy will lobby to turn it into a VAT. So not a 20% carbon tax, but a 10% VAT, which will turn into a 20% tax on everything. You go and cut our taxes or make everybody else's as bad as ours. The energy industry would be the ones arguing for the VAT to sort of load shed, so it's not just that. That's my theory of the universe, Mr. President. Any other thoughts or concerns? Thanks very much. And this is great reading, this President's List of Tax increases.